Welcome back to my channel. If you are just joining us, please go back to the part that you last left off on, or if you are joining us for the very first time, please go all the way back to part 1 so that you don't miss out on important information about our book. So let's review for a little bit about what we read last time. So we read 2 chapters like always. The first one was called The Golden Hoard, and it was about all of the books that Amy Ann and Rebecca and their other friends stole from the library. These were newer books that Mrs. Spencer had put on her banned book list to give to the school board, so they were just kind of getting ahead of the game and were going ahead and taking the books before they were like completely gone and they had to buy them or find them somewhere else. So she's got this huge stack of books that she has to put the due date card envelopes inside of, and while she was doing that, she found one of them. She found an old due date card that had a special name on it, and it didn't really tell us who, but it was clearly very special because she kind of kept it to herself. She didn't say anything else about it. And then the second chapter that we read was called Princesses 1 through 9. It was Friday at school, and I guess in their class what they do on Fridays is like a free-for-all read. So they get to sit around the room wherever they want to and read whatever book they want to, as long as it's not a book for school. So this would be like a free choice reading book. And once they started reading, their teacher, let me find his name real quick, Mr. Vaughn. Mr. Vaughn was walking around checking in on people, looking at the different books that they were reading, and he saw someone that was reading The 17th Princess, which, if you remember, was one of their fake book names, fake book covers that they came up with to hide one of the banned books. So, on the spot, Mr. Vaughn asked the girl who was reading it what the book was about, because he had never heard of that book, because of course it was fake. So she had to come up with stories of what happened to all of the other princesses before the 17th princess, which was kind of fun to see her make up these stories super quickly. Alright, we're going to read our new chapters today, starting right now. New customers. At lunch, Jeffrey sat by himself. He'd had friends before, other kids who liked talking about the same kinds of movies and shows he did, but no one wanted to sit with him now. Jeffrey seemed to want it that way. He picked fights with anybody who hung out with him for too long. I stared across the room at Space Cadet Jeff, feeling sorry for him. He'd always been a nice guy before. He'd been like this for a while now. Ever since that day we both got called to the office. He wasn't angry before that. What had Principal Banana been telling him as they came out of her office? Something about how she was sure his grandmother had been a nice person? Jeffrey's grandmother must have died. Was that why he was so mad? I could understand him being sad, but why was he so angry all the time? Then I remembered the books I'd read where people die. Sometimes the characters refused to believe it. Sometimes they just got to where they shut down and didn't want to do anything. And sometimes they got really mad. I had a book like that in my locker. In fact, after lunch, I wrote a note that said I wanted to talk and left it in Jeffrey's locker mailbox. He met me at my locker after school with a note in his hand. "What?" he said. "Hey, Jeffrey," I said. I didn't know where to start. I know your grandmother died." Jeffrey looked away, staring at the lockers. "So?" he said. "I just wanted you to know that I know what you're going through," I said. His eyes flashed to mine, and I saw the Jeffrey who'd gotten suspended for fighting. "Oh yeah?" he said. "Did your grandmother die?" No," I said. "Then you don't know," he said. "But I've read about it," I said, "in a book." Jeffrey snorted and looked away. I opened my locker and showed him the book. "Mr. Bear opens a bank account," he said. "Oh, no, that's just the fake cover we put on it to fool the teachers." I opened it up to show him. It's called Bridge to Terabithia. I think you should read it. Jeffrey looked up looked at the book in my hands but didn't take it. It sounds stupid, Jeffrey said. It's not. It's really good, I told him. It's about these two kids who invent this pretend kingdom and become the king and queen. I think you'll really like it. I held the book out to Jeffrey and he finally took it. I'll maybe read it, he said. Okay, I said. I hoped he would. Jeffrey walked away and I turned. Trey McBride was standing right behind me. I jumped out of my skin and then remembered to slam my locker shut and slip on the lock. Hey, Trey said. Hey, I said back. I tried not to sound nervous, even though I was. Every time I turned around, there he was. He stood there for a few seconds, just looking at me, but not saying anything. What did he want? Our First Amendment project was already finished. I want to borrow a book, Trey said. What? I swallowed, hard. The school library is right down the hall, I told him. I want to borrow a book from you, from your locker. I don't know what I want to borrow Captain Underpants, he told me. I know you have it. Trey flipped up the Go Eagles #1 sign on my locker and pointed to the list of banned books on the back. The green dots mean you have them, right? I want to read this one. My own little patch of quicksand was opening up underneath me. Trey knew all about the BBLL. Did that mean his mom knew too? Maybe she did. Maybe Trey had figured it out and told his mom, but instead of going right to the principal, she'd sent him here to check out a book as evidence. I shook my head. I was beginning to think like Rebecca. No, you don't have it? Or no, you won't let me check it out? Trey asked. He'd taken my head shake for a no. I didn't know what to tell him. If I gave him the book and he took it to his mom, it was all over, and I was in big trouble. But what if Trey really just wanted to read the book? Didn't all this start when he checked out Captain Underpants from the school library to read it? I'd gotten to know Trey working together on our First Amendment project, and I'd started to like him, despite him drawing me as a mouse in 3rd grade. And it was Trey's mom who banned the books, not Trey. Maybe he didn't agree with her at all. Maybe he just really wanted to read the Captain Underpants books. And that's why I had the banned books locker library to begin with, wasn't it? So anybody who wanted to could read the books banned from the school library? Trey looked disappointed in me and turned to leave. Wait, I said. I do have one, and you can borrow it. I was saying all kinds of crazy things out loud these days. I spun the dial on my lock, yanked it open, and got out Captain Underpants. Trey's eyes lit up. Do you have the 4th one? Captain Underpants and the Perilous Plot of Professor Poopy Pants? I did. My biggest mistake. I knew I was in trouble from the moment I set foot in the building Monday morning. It was in the way the other kids stared at me, then turned to their friends to whisper, the way everybody moved out of my way, like I was Hagrid parting crowds in Diagon Alley, the way my sneakers squeaked loud enough for me to hear them in the quiet hall. A chill ran down my spine, and I got goosebumps, and not the R.L. Stein kind. My footsteps slowed and my heart pounded in my chest. Something was wrong here. Very, very wrong. And then I turned the corner and saw Principal Banana standing next to my locker. Mr. Crutchfield, the Shelburne Elementary custodian, stood next to her with the long-handled metal cutters he used to cut off locks when kids forgot their combinations. No, I thought. No, 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 no. Miss Ollinger, Principal Banana said, I need you to open your locker, please. I started crying. I couldn't help it, even with everybody watching. Tears streamed down my face, and I sobbed once. This couldn't be happening. Mrs. Banana wasn't really standing in front of my locker telling me to open it. I was still asleep. I was dreaming. I had to be. This was a nightmare. Because if Miss Banana was there telling me to open my locker, that meant it was all over. Miss Ollinger, if you won't open the lock, I'll have to ask Mr. Crutchfield to cut it off. I wanted to say something. I wanted to do something, but all I did was stand there and cry. I was barely even aware of all the other kids who'd gathered around to gawk. All right, Mr. Crutchfield, Principal Banana said. Through watery eyes, I watched him slip the cutters around my lock and squeeze. The lock popped and Mrs. Banana removed it. The hallway was completely silent as Principal Banana opened my locker. The chink of the handle on my locker echoed in the quiet. It sounded like handcuffs going on my wrist. I wanted to fall to my knees. Where was my quicksand? I wanted it now. I wanted to be swallowed up by the ground and disappear forever. But there I stood, watching through my tears as Principal Banana pulled books out of my locker library. The covers didn't fool her for a second. She already knew. She opened one, then another, until she was satisfied they were illegal books. They all were. My locker was stacked full of them, from top to bottom. I let the backpack filled with my school books slide to the ground. Mr. Crutchfield, if you'll collect all the books in this locker and bring them to my office, Principal Banana said. Miss Ollinger, you'll come to the office with me, and we'll call your parents. I followed along, numb. I saw Rebecca, her hand to her mouth, and tears running down her face. I saw Danny, whose pained eyes stared out from under his perfect hair. I saw Javi, and Jana, and Parker, and Sophia, and Felicia, and TJ, and a bunch of other people who'd borrowed books from the BBLL. They watched me get taken away like a criminal. And there, at the end of the hall, was Trey. His mother stood behind him, her hands on his shoulders, looking at me like I had just slapped her in the face. Loaning that book to Trey had been the biggest mistake of my life. That was a crazy chapter, you guys. So all of these banned books has built up so much suspense about whenever she was going to get caught. And I feel like I knew it was going to happen because she kept mentioning it. I don't know about you guys, but I just had this sneaking feeling that she was going to get caught, and sadly she did get caught. So this chapter was a good representation of imagery. So if you remember, imagery is whenever it paints a picture in your mind. I want you to go back and re-listen to this chapter. And as you're listening to it, I want you to just close your eyes. I want you to close your eyes and picture all of these things that are happening. So you can see her turning the corner. You can see Principal Banana with the janitor right next to her in front of Amy Ann's locker. And you can just feel and see how upset Amy Ann really is. So go back and re-listen to it. Think about the imagery. Think about what you see in your mind, that movie or that picture that it paints as I read through it, and then answer the questions, and then check back in tomorrow to see what really happens. Hey guys, thanks for checking in and watching and listening to the book as we go on. Make sure that you're washing your hands and staying safe and staying clean during this time, and we'll see you when we see you. Bye.